welcome to this edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Ami Pamintuan.
At ako po si Robbie Alampay. Pag-usapan natin ngayon ang sunod-sunod na hacking ng government system at nakukuha na naman ang data natin from various... I mean, a couple of weeks ago, it was PSA, PhilHealth. Ngayon, pati ang
PNP, DOST,
House of Representatives, ang Senado.
Spike
Ano ba ito, Bok? Hiwa-hiwalay ba ito?
Mukhang iba-iba yung reasons eh. Yung sa PhilHealth clearly was ransomware. Yung iba naman parang a message that was trying to be put across that we can do it. Kasi some of them do it like parang
white
it's
hat.
a trophy thing.
Tinatawag na white hat, no?
Na parang bragging rights and all that. So, but yeah, the thing is kasi PhilHealth was for so many weeks trying to downplay the hacking the data breach. It's turning out to be bigger than they...
Yes, araw-araw nga, palaki ng palaki, no?
13 million data sets.
But at least, they were called out na by the National Privacy Commission.
But also, it was something so basic that even somebody at home can relate with it, di ba? It's just the renewal of a license that really opened this door to their vulnerability. And therefore, the vulnerability not of PhilHealth, but of our data.
Paano yan? Meron tayong no ransom policy.
sa ABOY. That also applies
Hindi
to
ba?
that.
Hindi ba? Paano yan? Hindi napagbigyan eh. Are they protected? I don't think they're protected now.
Yeah.
Could
But
happen
I
again.
suppose what's really amazing is parang biglang dumami eh.
Yes.
I don't know if it's only a perception, if it's only the reporting, or if it's a real spike in hacking.
Baka naman may nagte-testing lang ng mga
Exactly. But that's also why I'm asking, talaga bang hiwa-hiwalay ito? I mean, or is it just, may nauna, pagkatapos nun, libre batok na. Parang, madali na pala pumasok dito.
Yan na nga eh.
Yung mga Pinay pa naman magaling sa ganyan. Remember the I Love You virus?
Yes.
Pinagawa nun.
And he got recruited afterwards, ha? Yeah. Ito ang high-paying job dahil magaling daw.
Anyway, sige. So mamaya kausapin natin yung mga may sagot. Yung mga talagang nakakaintindi. We'll be speaking with cybersecurity experts. The Chiefs will be back after a quick break. Please stay with us.
Aside from PhilHealth and the Philippine Statistics Authority, 2 more government systems may have been targeted by hackers. A Facebook page called Diablock's Phantom No. 2 posted 25 links online. 3 of the links contained information from the Department of Science and Technology and the Philippine National Police.
The PNP says its forensic group database remains secure so far following reports of hacking. The website of the House of Representatives appears to have been hacked.
On Sunday morning, hackers defaced the House website with a troll face meme posted right on the landing page.
Now, the schedule of committee meetings was also altered. The site was reportedly hacked by a certain 3 musketeers.
The Department of Information and Communications Technology is keeping track of the possible breaches. The DICT warned shady groups may be using outdated data from previous hacks to create more panic.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. With us now in the studio, Cybersecurity Advocate ACEDILLO. ACE is the president of the PICS-PRO, or the Philippine Institute of Cybersecurity Professionals Incorporated. And then on Zoom, we have DICT spokesperson, Assistant Secretary ABOY PARAISO. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sir,
Good
to have
evening.
you on board, live.
Thank you, Ed,
from
Miss Amy,
AIM.
and Robbie. Nice to be here, finally, in the studio.
Asec, thank you for joining us. I hope you don't mind. We'll start with the person here in the studio. I want to start with
No
you.
worries.
Unang-una, all of these attacks we've been reading about is practically every other day. Meron na naman
Oo nga.
for the past couple of weeks. So we've had DOST, National Police, both houses of Congress. Hiwa-hiwala ito, and we've also been seeing different names. The 3 Musketeers with a Z, and ano pa ba? May Medusa. And so, but are we supposed to treat all of this, in fact, as separate incidents?
Well, the way criminal groups and even other cyber threat actors behave, no, it's easy to say that these are separate incidents because precisely they have different motivations and they have different reasons for conducting such activities. So immediately you can separate agad those who are economic or money-oriented and those which are probably related to a nation state and therefore either espionage or intelligence gathering yung kanilang objective. And pangalawa, there are now thousands of cybercrime groups and they have already specialized, no? So there are those that specialize merely in ransomware. There are those that specialize in developing malicious software or malware na tinatawag. And then there are those that are merely hosting exfiltrated or stolen data. And there are those that even specialize in deploying, no, malware. And then they let the others take care of developing the malware, and then they also hire other groups to do the negotiations.
So iba-iba.
Yes,
no?
definitely.
Just very quickly, of all the different attacks, and let's assume these are all unrelated, separate, and libre batok lang at this point. Could you give us an idea of the range of and variance of sophistication in terms of the attacks that we've seen?
Yes, in terms of sophistication and wherewithal, at the top of the food chain really are the nation states, no? And they have been identified previously by various countries, mainly the United States, the countries in Europe that do such evaluations, and even Israel. And the top 4 countries in terms of their cyber capability, albeit being used maliciously, are China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, in that order. Which is not to say that other countries are not conducting similar activities as these 4 that I mentioned. No? It's just that they are those that are perennially mentioned, and there must be something to it. No? It has been reported as well that countries like the United States and Israel have also conducted their own hacking campaigns, most often related to intelligence gathering, espionage, and even the conduct of cyber warfare operations. In the case of the U.S., the most famous operations were to take down the cyberspace operations of the ISIS previous to conducting their targeted assassination and ground campaigns.
Pero sir, let me try to limit it first
Yes.
dito sa local context natin. Are we seeing a spate of attacks, or is it just a perception of a spate of attacks in the Philippines? I mean, has this been happening for a long time already and we're just finding out about it now, or talagang may dagsa ng ng attacks dito ngayon?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Ed. No? I believe that this has been ongoing for several years now. And pag ang tinatamaan kasi private sector, they can get away with,
Not saying
not
anything.
reporting, not saying anything. And in fact, there is an incentive to not declaring or saying anything. Because at the very least, bukod sa tatamaan ka financially, there's a reputational risk that
credibility.
comes with it.
The market might
Not
react.
to mention that there would be regulatory and
Scrutiny.
punitive sanctions as well. Now, why is it that lately this spate of government hacks have come to the fore and come to light? Most probably because these government agents either refuse to pay or they have no way of actualizing these payments. Kasi, first of all, they can't declare this as off the book.
Sir, payments mean
Yes,
ransom?
ransom.
Or ransom,
Yes, yes. And I'm talking about ransom, no? And this cannot be the subject of emergency purchases because precisely as
It's ransom.
nirereklamo nga, the procurement rules for ICT-related products and services is very stringent as claimed. And I think si Attorney Paraiso can vouch for this. So, ibang-iba ngayon ang calculus when it comes to a private entity being hacked versus a government agency having a breach or being the subject of a cyber attack.
So, Asec PARAISO, yun ang tanong ngayon ng mga tao because, we started this with the PhilHealth ransomware attack na they were downplaying it at the start. Ngayon, parang every other day, parang lumalala yata yung picture na nakikita namin. Ang tanong ng mga tao ngayon, Asec, are you capable, is the government capable of dealing with this problem? Do you have the capability?
Well, I have to qualify that answer, ma'am. Again, we have to realize something that's brought up by former Congressman Ace. That is very important also, that you have to understand that each agency, or in the government at least, each agency has to, is responsible for their own procurement of their systems that is really dependent on their needs and requirements when it comes to data, their storage of data, the system that they would procure. So the qualified answer is it's really dependent on the particular agency, how good was their procurement, how the foresight that they employed, because one of the factors that you have to consider is technology is ever evolving. So if your foresight is very, very short, you would procure some things that's something that's on the market and really, really affordable, but it would be obsolete, kind of obsolete now within 6 months to a year. So, or the licenses that you procure are parang short term lang. So it's really dependent on the level of each government agency's procurement po. So,
But would you know
that's
if
a qualified answer.
would you know if there is a requirement for, kahit sa executive agencies man lang, wag na yung local governments, is there a requirement for them to protect their data?
Yes, ma'am. If you're asking about is there a requirement, yes, ma'am, because there are several laws in place. First and foremost would be yung Data Privacy Act po natin, that if you're a data collector or you're a data custodian, you really have to protect that data, and it would be subject to administrative and penal laws or sanctions.
Asec, malinaw naman po that spread out din yung accountability and the questions also have to go down to the department and at the agency levels. But specifically to the DICT, as not just any agency with respect to the issue at hand, what is the DICT's accountability and responsibility in the big picture for any attacks? Notwithstanding na, ulitin lang po natin, malinaw yung sinabi nyo, may accountability, may responsibility, bawat agency, especially those housing and holding data on behalf of the public. But specific to the DICT, ano po ang mandato at responsibilidad ninyo?
To give you a rundown of the mandate, so DICT is the technical assistance provider, the technical consultant of all government agencies when it comes to their ICT procurement. Before who kasi there was a MITHI program that was in place, but it expired. So right now we're just depending on MOA that would dictate each agency that would require them to go to the ICT and secure an ISSP for their ICT procurement requirements. So before any disbursement by the DBM, for the purpose of ICT procurement, kailangan makapag-secure sila ng ISSP ho sa amin. The problem there is, again, it's not codified right now. It's very dependent on an annual MOA being signed. Second, after the procurement, wala na ho kaming visibility on their particular systems. For example, if their licenses expire, or if they follow the TOR during the acceptance phase of their procurement, if they followed strictly the TOR that we approved, then after that the mandate of the DICT when it comes to halimbawa nangyayari na yung mga cyber attacks na to, just in any other instances, parang by analogy ang DICT parang kami, first responders, medics kami. We go in, we do our investigation, we do our initial assessment of what happened doon sa system. So our computer emergency response team goes in, do our VAPTs or yung vulnerability assessment and penetration test, determine the weak points, determine the challenges, determine the problems, and then come up with recommendations that individual agency that was attacked should follow. Now, when it comes to threat actors, their accountability and their attribution, those are left naman do sa mga law enforcement agencies and other agencies that do investigation on cybercrime. So, parang pag may nangyaring krimen, parang ang nangyari, ang DICT kami yung medic na nag-save. We try to save the system. We try to prevent anything serious from happening. We try to prevent any escalation of the damage. Then when it comes to attribution and the crime and the case build-up, that's left to other agencies na po.
Pero Asec, sorry, but it almost sounds like ang DICT para lang kay mortician eh. Well, maybe undertaker is more the word for it.
Consultant.
Yes,
So,
sir.
consultant before and then
Yes, sir.
medic after.
What I'd like to ask, sir, is wala bang protocols established by DICT that government agencies have to follow to the letter simply because this would be your specialization as a department? Wala bang ganong, I think you mentioned a while ago, hindi pa codified eh. But
Yes, sir.
in the meantime, wala bang pwedeng gawin to enforce some sort of protocol for all agencies to follow?
Well, yun na yung parang protocol natin, Sir Ed, when it comes to the ISSP requirement. So you submit your requirements, your TORs to the DICT for us to review, to assess if it's up to the various international standards. Then, when we give our certification, then that's the time that the DBM releases the funding for that program. Then, again, the problem lies there that after that, wala kami visibility if they followed. Kasi may acceptance phase pa yun eh. Acceptance phase yun eh. So, you have to understand, in procurement processes, iba yung TOR, iba yung actual acceptance pag tinanggap nyo na, o nasunod ba talaga yung TOR dito. Wala na kami visibility. And then right after that, yung maintenance nun, wala rin kami visibility doon. What we do is, the tireless men and women of the ICT, what we do is do VAPTs on targeted agencies randomly, constantly, and then we make them aware pag meron kami nakikita mga kahinaan doon sa mga systems nila.
Well, speaking of the men and women of the DICT, napag-usapan din yung personnel ninyo, no? And previously, Secretary Uy told us, kulang nga daw kayo ng tao to deal with all these problems. Ano bang situation ninyo ngayon? Will you actually need regular people to handle all these problems? O tama na yan? O do you need more money? You need more funding?
Actually, marami to address yung question nyo kung kulang talaga yung tao namin, ang katotohanan kulang na kulang talaga kami sa personnel here in the ICT. Yes. Our computer emergency response team alone is composed of 30 people.
30?
Ito yung mga nagtetest, nagrara ng mga VAPTs on all government agencies. At karamihan sila, if not all, are job orders. So, ang mga nakikita namin kung kakulangan is, unang-una hindi kami makapag-compete sa sweldo ng private sector. Yes. Na even with local companies, malaki ang disparity nung kayang i-offer ng gobyerno do sa ino-offer naman mga nasa private sector natin. Much less doon sa mga international companies that really see the talent and the skill level of the Filipinos when it comes to various ICT fields.
So ideally, how many people would you need? Diyan sa emergency response team lang.
Well, I have to get back to you on a specific number, but really, if we can double or triple our manpower, that would greatly help po. Tapos baka ma-approvean ho yung OSSP natin para naman ho makapaggawa tayo ng mga plantilla position so na para ma-retain yung institutional knowledge ho ng mga ICT experts natin. Tapos, once they do that, they can train now ng mga tao pababa at with other agencies ng gobyerno po natin.
Asec, may related question din ako doon. In
Sige
terms
po.
of ideally, you mentioned the low pay, the attrition, our inability to hold on to them and to compete for them. Give us an idea also, magkano ba kinikita nung 30 taong yan, and ano yung rate sa private sector kahit lang dito sa Pilipinas?
Kahit range lang, range.
Range lang.
Ang range ho, ang entry level ho namin siguro is around job order na ho to na may plus 20%, around 50,000 pesos so gross.
Gross. Okay.
Gross. And
Ano?
ito, ang magandang tanong ngayon pagdating mo sa private sector, maybe si Congressman Iso, being from the private sector, baka magulat ko kayo sa disparity.
O, Congressman.
Magkano ba?
Magkano?
Magkano bang alok nyo?
Typical.
Magkano sinabi
Typical.
niya na?
50 gross. 50
level.
gross.
I think the premium there would be from 15 to 20% above that offering. Sa
15
entry level.
to 20.
Entry level.
Yes.
Ah.
And that's just a conservative
And that's
estimate.
here in the Philippines.
That's here
Hindi
in the
pa yan yung
Philippines.
mga alok sa abroad.
Hindi. Dito lang yan sa Pilipinas.
And Asec, you're talking about plantilla, meaning regular, ha? You don't want contractual anymore. At saka hindi yan mako-cover ng confidential. Ano yun? Extraordinary and expenses, hindi yung covered.
Ako, Asec, may isa pa akong isang reality check. Doon, balik natin, and maybe Mr. ACEDILLO, you could also comment on this. Doon sa sinabi ni Asec na consultant lang naman kami at the start, di ba? And then we will have to make sure that they're up to spec. But both of you mentioned that up to spec doesn't last very long when it comes to and knowing how our bureaucracy works. I'm imagining, and this is my question, is it possible that by the time, even when agencies want to be compliant and are trying to be compliant, is it possible that by the time they emerge from the red tape and are finally in place to procure, obsolete na yung pinoprocure nila?
Well, that's absolutely the reality, Robbie. But I'd like to react on the point raised by Asec PARAISO kanina about codification. No? He said that yes, we have certain laws that are supposed to be in place, pero kulang po ito. And lahat sila prospective po after the fact po ang perspektibo. Bakit? For example, for our Cybercrime Prevention Act, by the mere use of the term cybercrime, ibig sabihin na hack ka na.
Nangyari na.
So that law becomes relevant only after napinsala ka na. The Data Privacy Act, yes, meron siyang prospective provisions. It imposes certain responsibilities on data custodians and data processors. Again, magkakaroon lang ng punitive measures kapag nagkaroon ng data breach. So what's my point? Ang point ko dito, we need to codify a law that will mandate all organizations, both public and private, to impose an obligation on themselves na dapat maglagay sila in place ng tao, ng proseso, at ng mga teknolohiya na protektahan yung kanilang enterprise. Not just the data, but the ability. Preventive, yes ma'am,
Okay.
exactly, before the fact. And I'm saying this because this requires a change in mindset. Alam niyo po sino ang ahead of the curve in that sense? The central bank, the GCG, the Governance Commission on GOCCs, and the SEC in varying degrees. Okay, isa-isahin natin. The BSP, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, under their Manual of Regulation for Banks, requires very stringent requirements for banks and financial institutions. In fact, meron po silang mandato na dapat meron kayong senior bank officer in charge of cybersecurity with a corresponding cybersecurity unit. Yung pong GCG, meron din pong ganong regulasyon for government corporations na magtakda po ng CISO at saka ng Information Security Group. Ang SEC po, kaya ko sinabing in varying degree, kasi draft regulations pa lang, they are proposing that for all publicly listed companies, the same requirement, mag-designate ng senior management officer to be in charge of information or cybersecurity na may corresponding cybersecurity unit. And that is what is required across the board, both for public
And
private organizations. Kasi inevitable na po that everyone has to be in cyberspace. Yet, we have not imposed the obligation across the board for all of those in cyberspace to take care of both their enterprises and the people who interact and who they serve.
So walang ganyang batas, ha?
Wala po.
Okay.
Okay. Sige, we have more questions. Obviously, we're speaking with Assistant Secretary ABOY PARAISO of the DICT and also Cybersecurity Advocate ACEDILLO. But we will have to continue this discussion after a break. The Chiefs will be right back.
Previously insisting that their database was quote-unquote intact, PhilHealth now warns that 13 to 20 million users' data might be affected.
We hope that you have taken the precautionary measures that we have indicated in our public notification po. What we can only do is really notify them on the data that were leaked so that they can be made aware of what they need to do.
O di lahat kayo.
Welcome back to the Chief. Still with us, Cybersecurity Advocate ACEDILLO. Patay pa po yung microphone niya when we came on board. Ang ganda-ganda ng usapan dito. And DICT, Asec, ABOY PARAISO. And I know si Ace is relieved na patay pa yung microphone niya kanina. But what we were talking about...
Mukhang narinig eh.
Asec, si Asec narinig eh. But we won't repeat that. Instead, we'll just repeat the question kung saan nag-umpisa lahat yun. Asec, before the break, Mr. ACEDILLO was saying, there's a BSP mandate requiring banks, GCGs, to be basically compliant not just in their purchases, but in their structure, in their system. There has to be a cybersecurity team in place. There has to be a cybersecurity officer for every office, for every company, whether that's public or a GOCC. Question, wala ba tayong ganun for na batas? If something of that standard that doesn't just go to procurement, but that actually requires our departments to have these offices?
Actually, that only highlights the fact ho, yung sinasabi ho natin kanina na each government, and when I was asked the question to rate yung cybersecurity preparedness and resiliency ng ahensya ng mga gobyerno, that highlights ho the fact that each agency ho talaga is really up sa kanila yung primary responsibility kung how they take care of their cyber systems and their
let
cyber
me interrupt
software.
you there. I guess I'll just jump straight to the question. May standard ba yun? And is there a defined standard? When you say that it's department, is there in fact a defined standard for them?
To be honest, even in the international ICT societies and associations, so we really have to come together pa rin ho talaga have a definitive standard on what is the universal standard for ICT compliances ho eh. Right now, iba-ibang mga ICT unions, iba-ibang mga associations, iba-iba ho yung standards eh. When it comes to naman ho sa Philippines, we already, hindi naman ho natutulog at hindi rin ho, we try to fulfill our mandate. In fact, we already submitted our National Cybersecurity Plan to the Office of the President, which is now pending review and approval ho ng Office of the President.
So the answer is not yet.
Not
Sige.
yet.
Sige. Asec, anyway, mukhang napupundi na si President Marcos, ano? Sabi niya, he wants the DICT to be proactive, no? At para matigil na daw itong pag-hack ng mga ng government agencies. Realistically, ano ba pwede? Ano bang kayang gawin nga natin to prevent more hacking? Considering your resources, considering, the expertise that's available in the country, ano kaya ang pwedeng gawin? Ano yung proactive na yon? Anong pwedeng gawin?
Well, sa amin naman ho sa DICT, we reaffirm our commitment to be active partners of government agencies as they fulfill their primary responsibility ho of safeguarding their own ICT systems and infrastructure against cyber threats. We continuously, with whatever means that we have, we continuously train cybersecurity experts to be more upskilled in various agencies of the government ho. Medyo dun lang ho siguro yung kakulangan ho natin. Then, we regularly come up with yung continuous targeted random na VAPT testing ho natin on various agencies. And once may makakita ho kami ng kahinaan doon sa mga sistema na pinagbibigay alam na ho kagad namin sa mga respective agencies na ho na yan. And I'm an advocate na this is not just a government problem, but this is also a society problem na each and every one of us has their own responsibilities. Kaya nga ho, pinapaalalahanan din namin yung ating mga kababayan na there are certain steps that we can take para ho ma-mitigate yung effects nitong mga sunod-sunod na pag-atake at saka pagkukuha ng mga data ho natin. Unang-una na ho, yung regular na pagpapalit ho ng passwords ho natin. Adopt strong passwords. Iwasan ho natin yung gagamit. Kasi ho, pag nakakuha ng data, they try to guess or they try to pinpoint your passwords in your other accounts, especially your financial accounts. Kasi madalas ang ginagamit natin password yung birthday natin, birthday ng magulang natin, pangalan ng aso, pangalan ng asawa. Then try to adopt din ho yung mga multi-factor, marami na ho ngayon, multi-factor systems of authentication like OTPs, biometrics. Then ang pinaka-importante ho siguro yung pag may nagpapadala ho sa atin ng mga link, wag na natin ho i-click yung mga link na yan kasi kadalasan ho, dinadala tayo sa isang site or isang application na dun ho nape-penetrate yung mga ating mga accounts, yung mga ating mga data at nagagamit to kung ano man masamang balak po nila.
Yes, sir. Sir, of course, we do understand what you're saying, that we need to be protective of our own data. Pero at the same time, kasi I think the bigger problem is that the data that we give to government and to other institutions, yun ang nabubutasan tayo eh. Na wala naman tayong control on. Now, and I also understand what you're saying na wala pang codified protocols. But my question to you, and Sir Ashley, is this eh. I know we'd want to have a law codifying the protocols for cybersecurity, but can't we do anything in the meantime? Kasi, of course, for example, Congress would rather do maharlika or pass all sorts of law. In the meantime, for example, simple EO. It's like the BSP passing down regulations for banks to set up protocols. What about an EO for executive offices at least? And from there, move on.
Actually, more to the point, Ed, no, and I totally agree with you. No? The low-hanging fruit here really is for the President to issue an executive order boosting the cybersecurity posture of at least those that can be covered by an EO, which are, of course, mga executive agencies natin. No? At the same time, there is an additional mandate on the part of the President when we amended the Public Service Act as it pertains to the private sector. Ano po to? Under the amended Public Service Act, the President can actually order critical infrastructure, and most of which, by the way, I think 80 to 90% of critical infrastructure are in the hands of private sector.
Okay.
He merely has to issue an executive order, separate pa to dun sa EO and cyber, no? Another EO declaring certain critical services or critical infrastructure under that remit of the law, no? And then, by virtue of that EO, pwede na niyang i-mandate kung wala pang cybersecurity measures in place, i-mandate itong mga critical infrastructure na ito to put such cybersecurity measures in place. Again, meron na po tayong working model, no, based on the BSP regulation of banks and financial institutions, based on the GCG regulation of government corporations, and even the proposed SEC regulation for publicly listed companies.
And then going again to that best practice, essentially, as in this case the BSP. When that mandate is spelled out, what happens? How easy, how simple, how affordable is it? I know we're talking about banking institutions here. I don't know if that's just incidentally they happen to be banking institutions. But when that is made clear, let's say beyond the banking sector, through an EO, through executive offices, what have we learned from the BSP experience? How easy is it to actually be compliant with that?
Yan po yung yun po yung benefit ng mga regulatory agencies natin. As soon as they issue regulations, that already puts on notice their regulated entities. As in a snap, talagang they have no choice but to comply. I wish, and I would not like to preempt what the effect of the EO will be, but again, I would hope so that EO will put everyone covered by that EO on notice. Not to mention that this spate of hackings should have put on notice everyone already, and it's actually sending a bad signal to all the cyber bad actors out there that we're easy pickings.
But to put it very simply, let's say i-require lahat ng department, o lahat kayo dapat may cybersecurity team at dapat up to certain standards and so on. Baka naman pilayin ka agad, no? Baka once I'm compliant, pilay ka agad yung budget ng department. Or is that not, in the big scheme of things, something that's actually affordable and actually they can implement?
That's a very good point, Robbie. No? Ang kagandahan naman kasi po, and I have been involved in the private sector. I was actually working on cybersecurity strategy for a critical infra sa telco. No? And in my experience, hindi naman kasi lahat yan kailangan ng pera. It's always people, process, technology. Baka naman additional training lang kailangan or additional manpower. Baka naman additional guidelines lang, like safe use of the internet, safe use of gadgets, etc. before ka pumunta doon sa decision whether or not to procure. Hindi lahat yan pera ang kailangan. Although yes, importante po talaga yung additional levels of funding for cybersecurity. But what we're saying here is that, we would like that EO and eventually that law to be the tide that lifts all boats when it comes to the cybersecurity practice in our country. Kasi the way it is now, the way I see it, mali po yung ating perspektibo. we are still very sanguine. We don't have any sense of urgency in addressing this cybersecurity problem. And yes, I agree with Asec PARAISO. It's not just a government problem, it's everyone's problem. But what we're saying here is, come on, let's have a sense of urgency.
Pero sir, let me zoom into yung sa nangyari sa PhilHealth kasi it's turning out to be a lot bigger than the earlier said. From what I understand, parang hindi na renew yung license ng antivirus ba or ng but how expensive could that be versus their budget? I mean, it's hard for us to imagine is it a humongous amount na kailangan ng talagang may line item sa budget?
Ed, that's precisely my point. That was driven by the wrong kind of perception or mindset. Isipin mo, if the mindset was always vigilant, always on guard, the moment na approaching pa lang yung deadline ng renewal ng license na yan, they should have been doing something already.
But how much would that cost? I'm wondering lang in terms of the pesos in the sense. Parang ito ba yung magnificent money o ano?
No, that's something that can be programmed, and that's precisely my point. That could have been programmed, and that could have been well within their means to purchase well in advance of its expiry. And, you know, it's not just even talking about antivirus. There are a lot more things that you can do to secure your enterprise. But the fact on the very basic point that you need to renew your license for your software and you did not do it, oh my gosh, that's a cardinal sin.
Walang urgency.
Yes.
Well, Asec PARAISO, one of the measures that the government did was to pass a SIM Registration Act na ngayon naman, because of all these things that are happening, gusto nila ipasuspinde. Merong mga nagre-recommend that it should be suspended and reviewed dahil mukhang it's not working, you know? What do you think of that proposal? What does the DICT think of that proposal?
Well, ang proposal, ang SIM registration, you have to understand, it seeks the intention of it or the spirit of the law. What it seeks to prevent is yung scamming na nangyayari for attribution. It did not really contemplate on attacks or these cyber incidents that's happening right now. So I think these are two separate things that should be compartmentalized when it comes to putting attribution on blame or effectivity of one law against the other.
So yung scamming nga, are you in favor of that? Nasuspendihin muna to dahil nga marami ding nagrereklamo at hindi naman mahabol yung mga complaints sa scam.
Hindi, even if it passes or it doesn't pass, it really doesn't address the problem of yung spate of attacks right now. What it would address if it is implemented properly would be yung mga scamming when it comes to yung using the data that were gathered from these cyber attacks na parang yung mga phone numbers natin would get spam text messages. Right now, kasi ang malaking tool ng mga scammers right now is anonymity.
Yes.
And that is the problem that the SIM card registration seeks to address.
Kaso nga hindi nga ma-verify yung identity even through SIM registration, di ba? Pati si SpongeBob nandun, pati yung monkey nandun.
Well, we do admit that there are certain things that need to be tweaked and addressed. Pero yun, that is with the system of the telcos when it comes to their SIM registration act.
Okay.
Halimbawa, Mr. ACEDILLO, hindi ba? We discussed this earlier. Maraming nagre-reklamo na nai-scam sila using the e-wallets, e-wallet apps, na hindi naman mahabol kahit may mga name yon. You know, you're expecting there's an account number, there's an account name. Bakit hindi mahabol?
Miss Ami, ang tawag ko doon, that's the tyranny of retail crime. Sa sobrang dami ng maliliit na cybercrimes na nangyayari na ito, hindi po siya magampanan, mahabol ng ating combined efforts ng tatlong, and I'm talking nearly about at least three law enforcement agencies when it's related to cybercrime. I'm talking about the Philippine National Police Anti-Cybercrime Group, the NBI Cybercrime Division, and to some extent, the CICC or the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center. Patungkol po dun sa punto ni Asec PARAISO, no? And you talk about mobile devices as related to the SIM card Registration Act. Meron po tayong nakikitang bilog dito sa gitna. Let's talk about attack surface. We have a term called attack surface when it comes to cyber. No? Pagpalagay po natin na all the possible ways na pwede kang atakihin in cyberspace is in that circle. When we passed the SIM card Registration Act, it merely covered 1/4 of that attack surface. Meaning yung pong mobile and wireless attack surface.
Yes.
There are 3 more attack surfaces that will not be addressed by the passage of that law, which hopefully the passage of a cybersecurity law will address the rest of the attack surface.
What are the 3 other?
Yung ano po is yung fixed wire, yung pong yung mga fiber optic and copper wire na dinadaanan na internet.
Yes.
Meron po tayong tinatawag na yun pong mga off-grid, no? Na mga yung off cyberspace, yung mga intranet. Ang tawag po naka-air gap ng mga systems but they are otherwise interconnected. For example, sa isang kampanya, hindi po sila nakakonect sa internet, pero nakakonect po yung mga computers nila, pati yung mga servers nila. That can still be the subject of an attack. Kasi po, kahit na naka-off siya sa internet, pwede siyang atakihin from the inside. That was what happened to Stuxnet. It was an off-grid, it was an air gap system. Hindi siya nakakonect sa internet. Yet, it was compromised.
Sige, ano pa isa?
Yung pang-apat po, ang huli, yung pong network of sensors na tinatawag na yung IoT, the Internet of Things. These are interconnected devices that can be a source of attack as well. And these are dumb devices. These are not smart devices, but they can be a source of very, very destructive attacks. Kasi pwede i-harness yung combined computing power ng maliliit na sensors and devices na ito to conduct, for example, a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service to bring down a server or a website.
Okay, very basic question. Kasi sa lahat ng binanggit mo, hindi ko natuloy alam kung saan ako
Masakit na nga ulo.
hindi ko alam kung saan ako lulugar. And now we're in the very broad
Telegramo lang
universe
tayo.
of Internet of Things. No? Bawat gadget na binigyan.
Viber lang kami sa
you're talking about we need a certain culture of awareness and a certain culture of urgency and alertness actually 24/7 in every aspect. But this basic question, given everything that you mentioned and how intertwined we are with technology, yung iba nga, they don't even own a gadget and yet their life is dependent on technology, whether they know it or not. Is there a way to... Is this still a world where you can actually be 100% disconnected and therefore safe?
No. As you said, for you to exist in this world, in this time, you will have to surrender a certain part of your life. Maybe your personal information, kahit wala kang gadget, as you said, no? But you will have to entrust that information somewhere. For example, pag pinganak ka, kailangan mo ng birth certificate. That system was already digitized. Pag mag-aral ka, kailangan mo ng learning reference number with DepEd. That's already in a database somewhere. And then when eventually, after you graduate from, go through the educational system, you have to work. So you will enter the tax system. That tax system with the BIR was already automated and digitized. And so wala po talagang, at no point in time, will your existence be totally devoid of the digital realm. So, ang punto ko na lang po dito is that let's try to make it harder naman for the hackers and the cyber criminals. Kasi the way we are the way we are behaving both as a society and as individuals, we're making it very easy for them. And by the way, as a criminal enterprise, cybercrime has already catapulted itself third. If you were to rank it as a country's GDP, it's already third behind the US and China. It has already surpassed by many trillions of dollars the absolute dollar value of the illegal drugs trade for several years now. So, what's the message there? This is a very lucrative enterprise. And there's a lot going into this. Therefore, a lot of people and a lot of criminal groups will be entering this enterprise. So, let's make it hard for them. Let's not make it very easy for them because there is really a lot of money. Just to give you an example, just a sliver of that criminal enterprise, you know, the value of the cryptocurrency theft in 2020 was 3.2 billion. 70% of that went to only one country, North Korea. They were responsible for 70% of all cryptocurrency stolen in 2020. And why is that? Because it is a matter of national survival for them. It is a national policy for them to steal online in cyberspace because of all of this embargo, or all of this imposed sanctions on them. One of the biggest ways that they can survive is to go to cyberspace. And they have a 5,000 to 10,000 large cyber army. And they have been training these people since the advent of ICT in 1987.
Nahirap sa inyo, Mr. Asdil. Sakit na ng ulo namin. Pinasukan mo pa ng crypto ngayon.
So that's
sponsored.
sponsored.
Sige, Mr. Asec. And let me frame this already because we're almost out of time. Last question to you. Obviously, everything that we're discussing is very, very complicated. I think the message is there that we need to have a lifestyle, an awareness, a culture with a sense of urgency also. But lahat ng pinag-uusapan natin, we can try to be safe and responsible at the retail level, at our level. But ultimately, it goes back to government because you're holding on so much data. Maraming pinagkatiwala sa inyo. I'll bring it back to that, and that's the last question. How do we instill a higher sense of urgency and a better, more proactive culture at your level, at the level of our government?
Well, actually, that's the challenge. I was grinning when Kong Is was talking to you guys, and you guys had an overload of information. I think that's the bigger challenge for government. Really, is information dissemination and imparting that source of urgency. Kasi that's a comms problem, which I am experiencing right now as the delivery guy, and which you guys just experienced a little bit earlier ago as the recipient. Na with this particular industry or this particular topic, it's too technical that it's really hard to laymanize, and then at the same time deliver that when it comes to understanding, and then deliver that sense of urgency, not only with government institutions, government workers, but also the general public. So that's basically the first challenge, is imparting the need for us to be all vigilant when it comes to our data, and then help us in this fight against cyber threat incidents.
Okay. DICT Assistant Secretary ABOY PARAISO and Cybersecurity Advocate ACEDILLO. Sir, maraming salamat po sa inyong dalawa.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po sa panahon na binigay niyo sa amin.
Thank you for the chance to be here.
Here are the highlights from our conversation.
DICT is the technical assistance provider, the technical consultant of all government agencies when it comes to their ICT procurement. After the procurement, wala na ho kaming visibility on their particular systems. For example, if their licenses expire, or if they follow the TOR during the acceptance phase of their procurement, if they followed strictly the TOR that we approved, then after that the mandate of the DICT when it comes to halimbawa nangyayari na yung mga cyber attacks na to, just in any other instances, parang by analogy, ang DICT parang kami, first responders, medics kami. We go in, we do our investigation, we do our initial assessment of what happened doon sa system.
The low-hanging fruit here really is for the President to issue an executive order boosting the cybersecurity posture of at least those that can be covered by an EO, which are, of course, mga executive agencies natin. No? At the same time, there is an additional mandate on the part of the President when we amended the Public Service Act as it pertains to the private sector. Ano po to? Under the amended Public Service Act, the President can actually order critical infrastructure, and most of which, by the way, I think 80 to 90% of critical infrastructure are in the hands of private sector.
So it turns out, ang laki pala ng butas pa rin natin.
Oo. Diba?
And are we supposed to grin and bear it? Sa tingin nyo? Given the resources, diba?
Isa ngayon, as ACEDILLO was saying, diba? Maganda yung pagkakalatag niya, diba? Actually, you start with people. Diba? Parang bago pa tayo dumating sa equipment, bago pa tayo bumili, diba? It's the mindset. And I think one thing he was trying to put across was, I don't see the sense of urgency.
Yes.
When all of this happened, parang kita mo na parang there's something wrong with the attitude. Never mind of the people muna, but of the people at the top.
Pero baka dahil kasi hindi rin maintindihan. Alam mo, medyo marami-rami tayong low-tech dito. No? Hindi siguro ma-appreciate fully yung risk, no, sa network, sa cyber risks. Hindi kasi maintindihan eh.
And
Kaya walang
I
urgency.
suppose also as a general rule, government prefers to collect our data.
Yeah. At
In
sanay na eh.
various ways, including
Yeah.
surveillance and monitoring. Kaya kami confidential funds eh.
But
Dyan na lang yan, nakaparking na yan dyan.
Than to protect the data that they collect.
Oh, exactly. And that goes to the point of, nung pinag-uusapan ng national ID, for example. A lot of people, I mean, the activists were concerned about, baka gamitin yan against us. What we're seeing now is, you don't even have to worry about your data being used against you. The first thing you have to worry about is, secure ba yan once we allow government to be handling that?
Well, siguro yan yung something good can come out of it, yung heightened awareness
But it's a painful...
of the need for cybersecurity and for protecting data. Kaya lang, magkakaroon kaya ng resources to do the job? Yan ang tanong.
As with all the departments and every job that we talk about, na undermanned ang DOH, undermanned tayo sa nurses, undermanned tayo sa cybersecurity.
DICT,
50 people. 30 ba?
30 sa emergency response team nila. At job order pa. Job order pa. Yan ang problema.
May pera naman eh.
Ha?
May pera naman eh.
May pera naman, no?
Partly, may pera naman eh.
Confidential funds pala. No, but I don't mean to be
Tinanggal ang
I don't mean to
DICT.
be glib, but you know,
Glib, yeah,
we've been talking about confidential funds, intelligence funds for that matter. And kanina nga nung nabanggit niya yung that there is actually a disincentive not to report. But at the same time, for government agencies, how could you not report? This is in the budget. Pumasok sa akin yung confidential funds can pay for a ransom.
Yes.
Di ba?
At saka dyan talaga kailangan
But
yan,
ideally,
yung klaseng phone.
but ideally, it's not the ransom that you're paying for.
Oo nga.
Ideally, you pay for the security before
Yes.
magkaroon na.
Yan nga daw ang kulang, yung preventive.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, but I suppose it doesn't end here pa rin.
Yes.
It's going to be a long plod ahead. But it has to start somewhere. Sabi nga ni ACE, the easiest thing to do is to release an EO
Yeah.
Yes.
requiring everybody in the executive to
Dapat si
follow the rules.
Malacanang ang maging proactive.
And then people snap to attention and, there are actually some low-hanging things that they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it for the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao.
We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan.
At ako po si Robbie Alampay. We are One News, all sides, all the time.